And but for now, we're going to continue the conversation about the 50th anniversary of the Black Power Revolution. And I'm pleased to welcome Kafra Kambon, co-founder and former executive member of NJAC, and Clive Nunez, co-founder and executive member of NJAC. Gentlemen, good morning.
Morning,
Good
Lisa.
morning, good morning, good morning.
Morning to Trinidad and Tobago.
So this is the 50th anniversary of the Black Power movement. Many persons who are, Trinidad and Tobago is a young society, skewed to the young, so many persons who are watching may not even be familiar with what's happened and the impact that it had on the society. And we heard His Grace speaking earlier about the fact that we've come a certain way, a certain length, but we have so much more to go. How do you gentlemen see it 50 years on from the, I'll start with you.
Well, before we start with the 50th anniversary, there was the 51st anniversary of the incident at the Sir George Williams University.
That's
in
correct, Canada.
That was the 11th of February. Okay? So that the 26th of February 1970 was the day that the students and the organizations in Canada had asked, because they were putting the students on trial a year later, and they wanted to get expressions of solidarity. Okay? But as a result of the incident, right, an organization came into being, which is the National Joint Action Committee. But before that, you had the Joint Action Committee, which was the progressive trade unions. And then this incident happened, and then we were invited by the Student Guild. At that time, the chairman was Geddes Granger, Macandal, and therefore another committee was formed called the Joint National Action Committee. Right? So it went from the Joint Action to the Joint National Action Committee, and then NJAC became an entity in 1969. So that we were there from the beginning, because there are people who say when Clive Nunez and George Weeks come in 70, everything's spoiled. But we were there from the beginning.
From the start.
Yeah.
Back to my question now, I'll throw across to Kafra Kambon. 50 years on, what's your feeling about the whole movement? And, what needs to happen now, 50 years later?
I think it's one of the greatest moments of our 20th century history. And it is sad that so many young people, you said it, and don't know about it, because some young reporters have interviewed me this year, and they came from zero knowledge. And it tells you that something is very wrong with our education system. Maybe some of the same things that we tried to correct, you can see where they still need to be corrected, because we don't even know our modern history, far more the past history. And 1970 was such a significant movement, and it was just 50 years ago. And it was really a transformative movement. And people today, even though the society has relapsed in a number of ways, but still the type of society that people like Clive and myself grew up in, where the racism was so ugly, and unfortunately, they say that if you don't remember the past, you are condemned to repeat it. And you can see the rise of some of the same attitudes again in the society today. And that's the importance of memory of something. Because if you hold something in your memory, you know what the society was like. You know the efforts that were made to change that society. Then you have your guard up against reassertions of those kinds of attitudes. So we are seeing some reassertions now, but 70 was an extremely transformative period. It made us examine the society, look at the economy, our relationship to the foreigner, our race relationships in the society, whether the relationships between Africans and Indians, between other groups and a small white elite in the society at the time, you know, it made us re-examine those relationships. It made us re-examine our relationship to those countries that were exploiting us. And one of the things that that's a George Williams issue gave rise to is that it changed the image that people had of countries like Canada as countries that were so helpful to us and all of that, because in fighting the battle for the students, even before February 26 came around, because there were a whole lot of meetings in 1969.
Yeah.
1969 was a hot year in Trinidad and Tobago. And one of the issues taken up was not just imperialism broadly, but Canadian imperialism specifically. And institutions like the bank, the Royal Bank of Canada, and the other banks and the other Canadian investments there, we were able to bring the statistics to show the difference between what they brought to the country and what they sucked out of the country. So people were made aware of those realities in terms of Canada that had this very good image. And in order to fight this case of the students, we had to tell them the reality so they could understand what those students in Canada. And you know, when I say these things, I have to remember that I'm talking to people who don't even know that anything happened in Canada.
And they don't know the genesis of it.
Yes, I tried to get things down very quickly, you know, but it had to do with students who were caught up in a protest against racism in Canada. And you know, the Archbishop, the current Archbishop was here. I had a lot of appreciation for what he said. But the church was a target in 1970, the Catholic Church specifically, and that's why a demonstration ended up going into the cathedral, because the Catholic Church in Montreal had actually come out as one of the institutions condemning our people.
This is a very important topic. We have a lot of young people watching the show, you know. We have children and teenagers and young adults and senior citizens. So I think it's very important that we continue this conversation. Before the break, you mentioned that you saw a bit of what NJAC and the whole Black Power movement had worked to eradicate, reasserting itself now in Trinidad and Tobago society. Yes. What exactly did you mean by that?
Well, you know, you see openly racist attitudes in the society again, and that could not have happened. I mean, racism doesn't die just like that, but the openly racist attitudes could not have been expressed for a while after 1970. And it all had to do with a different consciousness in the population. So reshaping of consciousness is important. People remembering their history and even their recent history, because one of the problems in this society, it is ahistorical in a sense, and I'm talking about what is encouraged formally. Up to now in the education system, people of African descent in particular are absolutely marginalized in terms of the content of what they learn, in terms of the positive content, not in terms of the negative content, in terms of the positive content. And you know, in the wake of 1970, students themselves at secondary school at the time waged strong campaigns for the inclusion of African and Indian history, because and a generation now needs to know that when we spoke about Black Power, we were not talking strictly about Africans. And I should mention this point because, you know, sometimes you take it for granted. The thing is that Black meant non-white. We were talking about non-white. Otherwise, we'd speak specifically about African power or something. It meant non-white.
But now it has become so segmented, though, that you have African, in Afro-Trinidadian, Indo-Trinidadian.
Yeah.
You know, Asian Trinidad. And so,
well, you see, nothing is wrong with people having, because the term Black was not meant to erase particular identities. Society is not going to develop on the basis of people not having pride in their ancestry. And so it wasn't meant to erase anyone's historical identity. In fact, it was meant to strengthen that, because we believe in a society based on people having self-knowledge and being united on the basis of respect for each other and respect and understanding of each other's cultures. That's the only basis on which you could have a sound development of society. Otherwise, somebody has to dominate somebody and try to force them to be like them.
I want to bring in Clive Nunes here, who during the break told me he's 81 years old, or 81 years young.
Yeah.
But you also said that you feel a bit saddened. Why?
Saddened. Coming out of 1970, our country had, based on the demands of the people. You see, the name of our organization, NJAC, but before that, it was really power to the people, right? It is a particular demonstration, right, that started with about 200, 150 university students and the rest. I was the only trade unionist leader there, right? And that march that began with 210 were thousands by 3:30, 4 o'clock. You understand? It's just as though it was a trigger because fertile ground. So based on the demands, the thousands of feet on the street, the demands, the government of the day was forced to, because the demand then was we must control the commanding heights of the economy. That's when we began, George Weeks in particular, about Texaco must go. Before that, you had TLL, Trinidad Leaseholds Limited, which was British owned. And then before 56, the then Chief Minister, Albert Gomes, they brought Texaco. And in 1969, 68, 69, the demand started by George Weeks, and took up immediately by the Transport and Industrial Workers Union.
Saw the nationalization of
right.
Of
so we then
China.
had 75 state enterprises and 75 state industries.
Yeah.
So at the 2070 budget, when I listened to the Minister of Finance say, by 2018 we will have nothing to sell, I cried, right? Became very emotional because the people owned a lot. Today you hear, like the Chinese will own the pitch lake sooner or later. So what it is we have. So all the pride that was developed, right? It's like it's gone. It's sad to know that we had 75. What do we have now?
What is taking place this year for the 50th anniversary as we begin to wrap up?
Well, okay, a number of commemorative activities have been planned, and the first one is this morning, actually. So at 10 a.m. this morning, we gather outside of the Royal Bank, which is where the first action of 1970 took place. It started off as something small outside of the bank, but then somebody went to withdraw money in the bank. Other people went in, in protest, and the police reacted, and a number of events were triggered from that. So this morning we'll give people some insights into that, because I think both the question of what happened in and outside of the bank and the fact that the demonstration went into the Catholic Church as a demonstration, not to pray.
But this morning you're going in to pray.
Well, some people are some people are going in to pray, and that's okay, Some go to pray. Yeah. Maybe some even prayed in 1970 as well. Yeah. But so that's the beginning. So people will get a whole education about this period beginning today. Very significant.
What we're seeing here is the very first, hold it up, the very first flyer.
Handbill.
Yes, the flyer for the public meeting that was held in 1969.
Yes, that's when NJAC was formed in 1969.
First March, and you're commemorating that this morning.
Yes.
Okay, and you're going to continue throughout the year with activities?
Oh, yes, we'll continue throughout the year with activities. This is the 50th anniversary of something that is so significant for Trinidad and Tobago's development.
All right. Well, I'm sure we're going to keep touch with you across this year, the 50th anniversary of the Black Power movement, as we educate and inform a new generation and keep the flame burning, which is very important. Thank you so much for coming on the program. Thank you so much for coming on the program.